Double-blind crossover trial of methendianone, Dianabol from Seba, now known as I think Aceba, in moderate dosage in highly trained, experienced athletes. They call them experienced athletes here. Weightlifters. These typically in the scientific literature you see weightlifters, and that usually means Olympic weightlifters, people who do Olympic weightlifting, the Olympic competitive sport. These are actually just dudes from the gym.
Oh, okay.
Basically, yeah,
Bros.
I think so. From what I can say,
Double
several
blind
athletes.
trial on bros, on gym bros.
Basically, what they were able to do, they allowed them to choose whether they got a 10 milligrams of D-ball or 25 milligrams for D-ball. So this is what's really interesting. Of the 13 men, 18 to 30, chose 6 opted for the low dose regimen and 7 for the high dose.
Hmm.
So we have the more daring, the risk takers, and then some that weren't.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by Scott's book, BYOBBcoach.com. You can get Scott's book there, get the hardcover on Amazon, or do you still have any copies available left on eBay, Scott?
I think there's 2 there.
Two copies
2.
left. You can get them over there. I'll
Yeah.
put the link to that below. Scott will sign that copy for you. That's the hardcover. We're also brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code Think over there now to get 10% off of all of their stuff. They've got all your basic bodybuilding supplements like protein, creatine, intra workouts, and of course supplementsource.ca for Canadians. Guys, thank you to everybody from Patreon. We appreciate your support. Comment with questions, especially for Muscle Minds over on Patreon. We'll be happy to tackle those questions on the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, I'm excited to see what you're going to say today. Victoria sent me a few different studies
Yeah.
about Dianabol. And since we really don't see, I mean, these are like, I think back in the 70s, we're not seeing a lot of Dbol studies today. So
Right.
we are going
Right.
to go back in time
A little
today.
bit.
And I'm curious to learn, like, what were they trying to figure out? What kind of dosing did they use? What did they discover with D-ball back
Mm-hmm.
in the day?
Yeah, so let's hop in the DeLorean. We're gonna we're gonna fire up the gigawatts and go back in time. So I think this was like literally you sent me this yesterday. I had some other stuff. Like I was in the middle of messing with high voltage electricity
Oh,
and like
God.
putting stuff. Yeah, like for a battery charger for my electric motorcycle. So I'm like I kind of have to finish this, otherwise I'll forget what I was doing. I was hooking up shit, so I had to finish the project. But I got some time this morning, so this is totally no PowerPoint. This is just going to be winging me putting some pieces together, and we'll
Okay.
just look at the papers that I pulled up from my database. So
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. You sent 2 studies. I just went into uh, the first one that you sent.
Okay.
So there's a lot of interesting things that come out of this. So is this here we go. This is the one. So this is what you sent. And interestingly enough, a double-blind crossover trial of methendianone, Dianabol from Seba, now known as I think Aceba, in moderate dosage in highly trained, experienced athletes. And then I read what was on the side here. This is something that they was added, looks like afterwards.
I didn't
And
even read that.
yeah, I saw that. So this is the digital object identifier, the
Okay.
DOI, for the paper that was actually published before this, from what I can see. So this was maybe an offered invite to publish this paper in this other journal.
Hmm.
The full account is right here. And so we'll look at that. But it's interesting. I compared the two versions a little bit, and it's kind of fun. So
Hmm.
we'll go to this is the one that is a little more formal. It's a little bit cleaner.
Okay.
And basically what they did, and there's lots of little things. So you read the title and it says it's an anabolic steroid. It's an athletics crossover double-blind trial on weightlifters.
Okay.
So they call them experienced athletes here. Weightlifters. These typically in the scientific literature you see weightlifters, and that usually means Olympic weightlifters, people who do Olympic weightlifting, the Olympic competitive sport. These are actually just dudes from the gym.
Oh, okay.
Basically, yeah.
Bros.
I think so. From what I can say,
Double
several
blind
athletes.
trial on bros, on gym bros.
It doesn't really say. That's the interesting thing. They called them weightlifters. And here's their subject. Between spring of 1971 and 73, is that too small? Probably too small to read. Let me see if I can.
No, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay.
I mean, we
People
can
on
see
their
it better
phone.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Um, these were athletes between these during this time frame that were approached these researchers, these individuals, and from whom they selected. So these were guys that apparently were coming to them and saying, "Hey, I want to be part of a study on steroids." I'm guessing that's what I'm taking from this.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting selection of subjects. These are people who came to them, and actually, my master's thesis. I didn't even think of this until just now, but I did my master's. I was working with rats initially. We had a really cool model of resistance exercise training the calves with electrical stimulation with rats, and then a firefighter in Austin, Texas. His name's Jay Greer. Jay, if you're still out there, big dude, really great bodybuilder. Actually, he's like, hey, like sort of a cutting edge guy. He's cutting edge this kind of guy. He's like, hey, I want to. Can we get a study done with this particular substance? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what is it? It's dichloroacetic acid, which you can't even get. It's used for glucose disposal.
Okay.
In individuals who have excessive lactic acid, like babies that are born with excessive lactic acid production, literally to save their life. Anyway, he came to us. We fashioned together a study where we compared sodium bicarbonate, and creatine was in there as well. It's kind of a complex, it's kind of bizarre study design. And then this dichloroacetic acid, we had to get investigational new drug approval. We had to get a physician on board to even give this to these guys.
Okay.
Anyway, I've experienced that where they came to us, and then I worked with just firefighters. We had like
Okay.
12 firefighters. So it's kind of cool. Like, but these were highly motivated people. They wanted to be part of this study. They wanted to figure out what's going on. So, this is how they came to these. So these are the individuals. Now, during this time frame, and I've talked about this numerous times. This study was published in 1972. So this is 71 to 73. The study of interest here was published in 75, but in 72, people were studying steroids. And this is the Placebo study by Gideon Ariel and Seville at UMass, where they recruited, and I'll go to this here. They used male varsity athletes, and they ran them through a preliminary period where they told them that the most improved lifters would then be given Dianabol, right? And then they didn't actually choose the ones who were the most improved, but they all were trying to win the contest so they could then get the Dbol, right?
Okay.
And then they brought them to the University Health Center, explained the possible physiological effects of anabolic steroids in a positive manner. So they elicited this expectancy, which creates the placebo effect, right? That's the theoretical idea, is that you have an expectancy, like it's going to work. And it did. And I've talked about this study a good bit. No one got Dianabol. They all got a placebo. And
This is heartbreaking.
I know. It was a huge, it was like a 2 to 3. Let's see if I have this. Is it plotted here? Yeah. So here's what happened to the squat, bench press, military press, and like a seated overhead press over the testing period. So before the 8 weeks, make this a little bit bigger. Whoops. The 8 weeks previous to when they then gave them just placebo, though they didn't know that.
Okay.
And so this was the increase, and it's hard to they could have used bar graphs, or probably would have shown a little bit better, but they were improving. They were trying to get as strong as they could on these lifts, and then they gave them, and there's the total of all the lifts in this upper graph here. Mm-hmm. And then when they gave them the placebo, you can see the rate of gain was substantially higher.
Huge.
Because they thought they're on the stuff, right? But they weren't. So this was a study where they recruited these individuals, and then they created this entire sort of psychological, psychosocial environment whereby if you're good enough, we'll get you in, and we're going to give you the goods. And they elicited a pretty powerful placebo effect. So
Dang.
so that and I wonder too, because in this study, we're going to go to the published one that was published in 72. These people were coming to these researchers between 71 and 73. They eventually published it in 75. I
Yeah.
wonder if some of them hadn't even heard about it. Did you hear about what's going on at University of Massachusetts?
Hmm.
They're giving them Dbol, blah blah blah. I don't know, but Dbol was in the collective consciousness of the meatheads at that time, right?
Yeah.
And I wish they'd have said they by several athletes, so they don't really say who these guys were. Um, so in their double-blind crossover trial, um, basically what they were able to do, they allowed them to choose whether they got 10 milligrams of Dbol or 25 milligrams for Dbol. But they also knew that they were going to end up with a placebo potentially, right? So now they're aware of the possibility that they might get a placebo. In the Gideon Ariel study, they all were told that they're getting Dianabol. Okay. In this study, they know like you could get the goods, you couldn't get the goods, and that's a problem just in general. This is why this is kind of a cool little microcosm for what happens in studies with ergogenic aids. Is you get some guys who are interested in ergogenic aids, and that's in my master's thesis, for instance. We did a crossover trial, and everyone got everything, including a placebo. But they knew they'd all get something, right? But it was a very short. We're looking at acute performance, so it wasn't a training period where you could potentially, let's say, you're going to another study and like you just get the placebo and train for 10 or 12 weeks, and you don't get the benefits of whatever it is that they suspect would be ergogenic / anabolic. So you could end up on the short end of the stick in those studies, right? And say, well, this sucked. Well, that immediately creates some selection that some people are going to like, I'm not going to do that stuff. Why would I go and waste 12 weeks of potential progress? I'll just take
Yeah.
the stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you're missing out on people. So this is what's really interesting. Of the 13 men, 18 to 30, 6 opted for the low dose regimen and 7 for the high dose. So we have the more daring, the risk takers, and then some that weren't. Let me get this over here so we can read it better. And 7 took methendianone, so Dbol first, while 6 started with the placebo. All 13 forecast correctly what the code would be when broken. So it's double blinded. So those individuals aren't told. They supposedly wouldn't know what they're getting, and the researchers don't either. What the code is, basically you assign a code to a third party, someone who's neither directly involved. And then when you're done and you gather all your results and you do all your analysis, then you break the code and figure out who got what when. Right?
Okay.
So
but they all predicted who got what.
all
is what
13
you're saying.
knew exactly when they were on the stuff and when they weren't, right?
Got you.
So this gets really interesting. Of the 7 who started, 2 realized immediately. So let me read the whole thing. Of the 7 who started the Dbol, 1 athlete gave us no data on performance, but claimed fantastic improvements. So he just like said, just didn't give. He's just like, it was great, it was awesome, but he didn't give them any data. And from what I can tell, they're just saying like, go give us your best lifts. It's somewhere it's listed in here. It might be in the other paper, but I was jumping between the 2 versions of this basically same report. 2 realized immediately that they were on the active treatment and disappeared from our ken once their steroid supply was exhausted.
Oh, they're
So
like,
they
I'm
got
done
their
here.
scripts and they ghosted them. They just said, okay,
Wow.
because I know that I'm on the shit, right? And now you're going to put me on a placebo. Well, why would I do that?
No.
I don't have any ethical obligation to take a placebo for you, but thanks for the gear. I appreciate it.
How many? 2 of them. 2 of them. I wonder
Yeah.
if they talked about that. Like, hey, what do you say we just get out of here now that we have our gear?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So this is why compared to the Ariel and Seville study where the placebo effect was demonstrated, they basically they got those athletes, and instead they picked them so randomly out of those that were in this sort of pre-competition.
Yeah.
So imagine you got whatever 500 athletes on campus that could have done this study, but 15 are like, oh, I want to get some D-ball, right? And I am so willing to that I want D-ball so badly that I'm willing to spend 8 weeks trying to win the competition. This is like a reality TV show, basically.
Yeah, it really is.
You know,
In fact, that would be an amazing reality TV show if we could set that up today.
you could
compete,
replicate
and
the
whoever
study.
wins
Yeah,
gets
right.
on D-ball, just like the '70s study.
Yeah, this is like this instead of the biggest loser, the biggest gainer, and you could just you could do this. So there's my $1 billion idea. Shit, someone take it with it,
dude. That would be fun for bodybuilders to watch. Like we would enjoy that, man.
Oh, that would be huge. You could do a whole YouTube channel on that, building and showing the interviews with folks and everything else.
Especially like guys who got the placebo. And they're doing their like, you know how they do like the individual confessionals, and you have a guy who thinks he's on D-ball,
Yeah.
and they like pull him aside, and he's like, yeah, so we know it says like, you know, placebo participant would be like the caption under the bottom, but he doesn't know at the time, and he'd be like, yeah, I can really feel my aggression is picking up in the gym now. My strength's getting a lot better.
You know, it's you reminded me of like when we were when I was in college. I think it was one of the summers in college, and I was back with all my friends from our hometown, and we made a pure grain alcohol punch, a PGA punch.
Okay.
And it was at a friend's house, and like that stuff is just crazy strong, right?
Yeah.
And we had one friend, I won't say her name, but she would always be just like, oh, I'm so drunk, you know, and just kind of overdid it. So we mixed up the whole punch, and we're getting all these things ready for the party, and we set aside some of the punch that had no alcohol in it and gave her that. And she just got drunk as hell. She just,
wow.
The whole time, I think some of this was probably just, you know, kind of acting like just that's that's the nature of her personality, just kind of overdoes things perhaps, but there was potentially also a placebo effect in there.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. So that's a part of it, right? So, but there's more. So anyway, the reality TV show would be great, but it's important that these guys came to them thinking, hey, are you doing some stuff on steroids? Because I want to be involved with a thing on steroids. And then they knew that they would get a placebo, potentially one of the two portions of the study in the crossover. So that's a very different mindset to have. They're knowing that, you know, did it say? No, I was thinking like I wouldn't be surprised if some came in. Well, they all knew what they were on. So some of them at least. So this is interesting too when I think through. Some of them said, okay, I'm on the placebo now, but this means I'm going to get the gear later. So I can hold on for that. But they know they're getting the gear.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what the subjects in the placebo treatment thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
They're super motivated, and they're trying to win the competition. And they're like, now we're getting the stuff. So if they get the placebo and it doesn't work, but it's a totally different mindset to say, I could be getting a placebo, I might be getting the Dbol. And when nothing really happens, they're like, huh. And they all figured it out, apparently. Then they knew that if I just stick it out for this first portion of the experiment, then I'll get the Dbol in the second portion. Yeah. Whereas the two of the guys realized they were on the Dbol, and they're like, well, we're not sticking around for the rest of it because we don't owe you guys anything.
Right.
And instead of one withdrew from the trial because of side effects. Of the 6 starting on placebo, 2 became discouraged and gave us no usable results. Huh. And of the other 4, 2 withdrew during active treatment because of side effects.
Okay.
So this is really interesting. We record these failures without embarrassment since highly tuned athletes, I think these were just gym bros, are rather, quote, prima donna-ish.
They're calling the participants out.
I can't blame them. You can imagine like these motherfuckers. How are we going to make sense of this data? Because everyone's just leaving. We got like the one guy came in and he got the gear and didn't give them any data and just said, hey, thanks for the great results. Fantastic improvements.
All good awesome. Here.
That's all you needed, right? I'm sure some coaches are maybe out there listening and thinking like, this is half of my clients. They like you know,
that's what
like,
Blunt Force Tanya said. She said, half of clients, all good. No data submitted once.
Okay, right. There we go. So people know this. I can't
Yeah.
see the comments. I'm just seeing my screen that I'm reading from here. So that's I wasn't coming off her comment. That's exactly what was occurring to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so interestingly enough, too here, and I've just pulled several things that could go deep into various things, but they looked at the reported changes in performance. Let me bring this down a little bit. So here's there's basically two conditions you could have been in: steroids first, then placebo, or vice versa. This first group shows what happened with the steroids, and then this one guy maintained his gains throughout the placebo. And here's the group that got placebo first, and then the steroid, and they made some minor percentage improvements, and then when they got the steroid, it took off.
They just
So,
blew up.
but it could have been 10. So low dose was the filled circles, and high dose was the open circles here. So like this low dose person didn't really get much out of it. Maybe
Yeah, sure
didn't have any side effects. Made it noticeable.
Yeah.
10 milligrams. A lot of people could tell if they're on 10 milligrams. This low dose person here, interestingly enough, got the steroid first. This is why it's so cool to have the individual data. Sorry about all that. Got the steroid first and actually made better gains during the placebo period. And then there's no data after that. They may have vanished. They may have left when they realized, I mean, it could have been, there's all sorts of possibilities here. This is me just completely, wild ass guessing it. But, maybe he was making good gains here, and then he started to notice, and then when he came off the steroid, he started to get a little bit hypogonadal potentially. He started noticing something was missing, and then he's like, "Oh shit! Now I'm actually on the placebo." So he thought he was on the gear initially. Who knows who these guys are training with? Maybe, maybe there's one guy who got the gear and got the Dbol, and the other guy didn't, and he's like, "Man, this stuff is great." It's like, "Yeah, it's awesome, isn't it?" And they're basically colluding. He's thinking, we're getting the gear. They maybe didn't pay attention that you might not get the placebo first. There's numerous possibilities.
Yeah.
But he was doing really well for the first 1, 2, 3. It looks like, I can't see. There's a missing data point. The first 3 weeks after placebo, and then he took off.
Okay.
Whereas this guy was on the high dose. This person who looks like he made pretty much the best gains, and then he maintained it, and he stuck in there.
Yeah.
So there's lots of possibilities here, and this is a whole other talk. Actually, I'm going to do a podcast on this in like a month or so, I think, with AJ Buck actually. So look for that when it comes out. But there's numerous genes, like 20 plus, or maybe even more, since I haven't looked directly into it again. But like there are 28. Single nucleotide polymorphisms, so specific genes that are involved with various aspects of neurophysiology that are predictive of one's amenability to a placebo effect.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there are things that, for instance, catechol methyltransferase, which is involved with breaking down dopamine, depending on which version of that enzyme, and that will dictate to what extent you have elevated dopamine levels. So kind of
COMT.
COMT.
Sure.
Yep.
Gotcha. That's what I know what it is. I was doing breaking it down. Gotcha.
You looked into this somewhat. So
A little bit.
What version of that enzyme you have will dictate how much dopamine you have, and that excitability, that amenability, that expectancy. So it's like someone goes in, they're like, "Man, this is a waste of my time. Like, I don't even want to be here." Right? I'm kind of overdoing this. That might be indicative of like their dopamine levels aren't particularly skyrocketing at that point. But someone else comes in, they say, "Oh, God, this is going to be awesome. Finally, I'm going to get jacked. Give me the goods, baby." Yeah, there it is, and they rip open their thing. Like you can't. You remember this, Scott, back in the day? Like you'd order something in the mail, and it would take 6 weeks to get there.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, I mean, people don't have the patience for that anymore. Like Amazon next day delivery, you can have this, in 8 hours.
Oh yeah. No tracking either. You don't actually know if it's going to show up. You never got verification that they got your money or anything like that. Just magically something comes in with a bunch of crazy stamps from another country,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, there's
if you're
that
lucky.
too. But I'm thinking just like stuff you ordered, like just that wasn't from another country, whatever. Everything just took forever.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, it's like this, you're just waiting and waiting. And so there's a massive buildup. So anyway,
Yeah.
the degree to which the people are amenable to the placebo effect is highly variable. So that could be playing a mediating role here in what's going on with some of these guys, this guy who made good gains, the guy here at the bottom who made good gains during placebo effect. Maybe, who knows, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he's like, maybe he was guys, he didn't make the greatest gains during the steroid, so maybe he's thinking now I must not have been getting the steroid. But he actually, I take that back, everyone knew it was up. But what's
Oh
going
yeah.
on with this guy? They all figured it out afterwards. Actually, I take that back again. So this is why this is so cool. I believe they asked him after the study what they thought
Okay.
they were on. So we imagine this guy, just this is again, I don't know, no idea who this is. They probably, the person may not even be alive anymore, right?
Right.
But if he's not making great gains, and maybe the word spread, who's doing this study, who's in it, and then when he's on the steroid, he might have been thinking at this time point, okay, now I'm on the gear.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't get the side effects. He starts thinking about some more, and then that's why he drops out. And then afterwards, he's like, okay, now I think I know what's up. I think I had the steroid initially because when I thought I did, and I actually had the placebo, X, Y, and Z happened. Okay, when it was all said and done after the study, assuming they could get a hold of him because he stopped giving them data. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe he just went down to the bottomed out here afterwards
Yeah.
too. We don't
Yeah.
know. So anyway, it's always fascinating to look at all this stuff. Um, so they made some measurements of cholesterol. None of this is really groundbreaking stuff. Uh, so this is interesting. I've just pulled some various things. So in their discussion here, they phrase this differently. Let's go back. Here's the original publication, and
Okay.
they have a subsection entitled "Anecdotal Lore." And I thought this was interesting because it seems like there's potentially some inherent contradiction in what they're saying. We have heard of doses of up to 300 milligrams per day being taken for months or even years. And I think they mean just anabolic steroids in general, not 300 milligrams of Dbol a day. But that's over 2 grams a week, right? For months or
Mm-hmm.
even years. But the consensus of opinion is that huge doses are no more useful than the moderate doses we used. It's like, okay.
Okay.
So they also address that here in this other version, and they framed it a little bit differently.
Okay. So same
We have
study,
this is
other
the same study, it's just a
publication,
different publication, different version.
which is weird. It would be different at all. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, I don't like. Sometimes it's like, we'd like to have a version. It is kind of bizarre.
Ah.
Normally, you can't just publish the same thing over again. That's an
Ah.
issue.
Okay.
But yeah, but they made it known, right? It's in the first page here. They made
Yeah.
it known right here, a full account of this work. So this is supposedly the less full account, and there's one author different. So here, I believe there's an author. There's two actually authors that are different. So here, two people collaborated on this one. Here, there were 4 authors.
I
So,
gotcha.
so who knows what's going on? They had a falling out. There could have been a million things. But here they said, we have heard of doses. They just phrase this differently. We have heard of doses of up to 300 milligrams per day being taken by athletes. But there is no evidence, none, objective or anecdotal, that these huge doses achieve any greater effect than the doses used by us.
Huh.
So,
Okay.
so all the people that they've heard of having taken that, none of them have ever said that it made any difference because
Never.
there is no evidence, anecdotal or objective.
Huh.
It's
Okay.
like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But that's interesting, and the reason I bring that up is it's not, it doesn't tell you everything, but a little kind of I'll call it at least a pink, if not just a flat out red flag, is when someone says flat out, there is no evidence. That means that you are all knowing, and you have access to all of the information available in the entirety of the universe, and you can say in a black and white fashion that there is no evidence to this, right?
I think it's important we maybe apply what you just said to a lot of the content we consume in life, not just these studies.
You hear this so often, and
You
like,
do. You do.
and when it comes from an authority, it's like, okay, well, it's like I try to, like, I'm not aware of any evidence, or the bulk of the evidence I'm aware of, or what have you, because obviously I haven't read everything. I can't. I mean, ChatGPT makes its own. It makes errors, right?
Yeah.
And I catch these things because sometimes I kind of compare what ChatGPT would tell me, and there's all sorts of bizarre stuff that comes out. And ChatGPT
Even in
hallucinates too, of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
even in art school, it was we had kind of a same philosophy where instead of saying the history of photography, you could say a history of photography.
Yeah.
Very
Right.
what very small difference there, but a very big one at the same time.
And history, sometimes certain regimes try to rewrite history, or certain individuals depict history in one way versus another. So I just thought that was interesting to say, like, there's no evidence, objective or anecdotal.
Yeah.
So, and so this was published in 1975. In 19, this was 78 or 77. No, 78,
Okay.
right? I was right. This is the American College of Sports Medicine position stand on the use and abuse of anabolic androgenic steroids. This is the classic first one they put out, I believe. And they have in their summary abstract here. Second point is there is no conclusive scientific evidence that extremely large doses of anabolic androgenic steroids either aid or hinder athletic performance.
They're nothing,
So there
basically.
no conclusive. So, I mean, here in this study, we see individuals taking moderate doses, 10 or 25 milligrams. That's not huge. So this is extremely large doses. But
Hmm.
here we have moderate doses being effective in this particular study, which was pretty close to a series of case studies because they weren't being tested in the lab. It's just like bros coming back and say, "Yeah, this is how much my bench went up," or whatever. We don't even know what it was, as far as I can see. Maybe like I said, I haven't read every single word, 15 times, but like they're just reported back on what they had going on.
Yeah.
So this is the 75, and then in the 87 there was another position stand, and more data had come out from the American College of Sports Medicine, and their statement then, once again, the second statement in their summary abstract is the gains in muscular strength achieved through high intensity exercise and proper diet can be increased by the use of anabolic androgenic steroids in
Oh.
some individuals.
Oh.
Okay,
Only
so
in some.
they as and this it's interesting because that's what science will do is like given what information we have available, we will create a very contextualized statement of what we can say. That's good science. In 77, that was the state of the art, state of the science, and in
Hmm.
87 things changed. And this obviously paper they wouldn't consider conclusive in 1977 because these are just bros reporting back, right?
I see. I see.
Yeah, and there was one other thing. Let's see here if I can find it. Um, is it in this? I can't remember which version it's in now.
This is fun, by the way. This
Yeah.
is exactly what I hope for,
Yeah.
Scott.
Okay.
It's the context, the pictures you're painting,
Yeah.
your imagination that you're applying to it is it's just fun to listen to,
Okay.
man.
I'm glad.
This is so cool.
I'm glad. I'm like, see if I can pull something out of this. It's not
It
like
really is. And guys, if you are enjoying this at home, then definitely comment, let us know, and of course hit the like button, all that stuff. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Just a quick shout out to True Nutrition. I figured I'd bring you to the home gym here, so welcome. And I just wanted to show you my order. So, nothing big deal. I've got a few pounds of the cold filtered whey ISO. I'm a big fan of the cookie butter flavor. I've been on this year. This has like been my favorite. But they've got a bunch of different flavors. So if you're interested in something else, just check them out. It's a very light protein overall. It's not going to bloat your digestion down. It's not going to cause a bunch of water retention. This is the kind of protein that I suggest to people who are doing a contest prep. They've got all your basic bodybuilding supplements like creatine. They've got great intra-workout, highly branched cyclic dextrin, which is the high end And then they've got the cheaper stuff like Carbo Load, like anybody can afford that. And of course, use our code THINK. It'll get you 10% off. They really kicked up. It used to only be 5%. Now you get 10% off if you use the code. And it throws some money our way too, so it definitely helps the podcast out a ton. Might be a buck here and there, but you know, if you guys all use the code, it definitely adds up. And you have been using the code, so thank you for that. Let's get back to the podcast, but thank you for hanging out with me here in the home gym.
So they mention here into the anabolic lore section of their discussion, and they cite a paper I couldn't find. I looked around. I didn't spend a day trying to get it, but I couldn't find the paper. But it said, as might be expected from nitrogen balance studies, the effect of anabolic steroids seems to wane after about 6 weeks in spite of continuing treatment.
Huh.
The gains are usually maintained for some weeks after stopping the drug, but then follows a period of relative weakness, which may last for several weeks. On steroids, athletes generally become less susceptible to fatigue. So they're basically representing the idea that anabolic steroids are not particularly anabolic. Maybe they're anti-catabolic. But that nitrogen balance suggests that a positive nitrogen balance, so nitrogen balance would be indicative of protein accretion, wanes after they say 6 weeks, and they cite a paper. It's the 17th one here and there, and I don't even know what the title of it is, and I couldn't find it. I dug it up, and I'd have to dig and probably go interlibrary loan. Take 6 weeks to get to me.
Yeah.
Because someone's got to go down to the catacombs and find the microfiche and make photocopies and then send it in the mail. So
Victoria does that all the time, by the way.
Yes, I know she does. Yeah. I've helped her with some of the German ones. She's got like, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, this brought up the idea nitrogen balance for quite a long time. It's a phenomenal method. So what nitrogen balance basically does, you can do this with animals, and you can do this with humans, which is where I'm going, is you look at the nitrogen in to the body. So that would be the protein you're consuming, and protein is about 16% nitrogen versus the nitrogen that comes out. So you would collect fecal matter. You would ideally even see how much skin cells and hair is being shedded. You look at the nitrogen in the urine, urea nitrogen, and you tally that up, and you can say we have 10 grams of nitrogen or 2 grams of nitrogen difference. Nitrogen is being retained in the body. That means protein is being retained in the body. So 2 grams of nitrogen equals X grams of protein. So the nitrogen balance would then tell you what's happening with protein balance in doing that. But it's an interesting thing, and because there's a study from Mark Tarnopolsky, I didn't pull that one up, but it occurs to me now, where they looked at different protein doses. I'm just going by memory here. I could find this really quickly if we want. And they found that a higher protein intake, this is like from 2000 or maybe even the 90s, caused positive nitrogen balance over X number of weeks of training. The interesting thing from that study was if you took that nitrogen balance, calculated what that should have meant in terms of protein balance, presumed that all that protein was being brought into skeletal muscle cells, let's say just assume 23-25% protein by weight, those individuals should have been putting on massive, highly detectable increases in fat-free mass by way of muscle mass. Didn't happen. So the nitrogen balance, I like to think of it as it's qualitative. A positive nitrogen balance is a good thing. But if you want to look at the actual numbers, as far as saying that it's quantitative and then it can predict changes in body compositions or increase in muscle mass, doesn't do a very good job with that. And there's a study where they really looked at this closely. This was from 1979, so it's just about this same time frame. I'm an old guy, so I've been reading these studies for a while. So this was a ward study. So these were 6, I'll read it here, 6 healthy young adult male participants were confined to a metabolic ward for 105 days. Okay. They were given one of 2 diets, one with 12 grams of nitrogen per day. So that's like around a little less than 100 grams of protein per day. It's actually about 75 or so, and 36 grams of nitrogen per day, and that was 225 grams of protein. So if 16% nitrogen is 16% of protein, you can divide by 0.16 and you get the amount of protein, right? And for about 50 days each. On the 36 gram nitrogen diet, so 225 grams of protein per day, all participants exhibited strong positive nitrogen balances, about 1.6 grams per day, which were not as high as reported by other investigators, but which persisted for as long as they were fed this diet. So I did the calculations. I think you can probably see this here. If you calculate 1.6 grams of nitrogen retained per day, that's about 10 grams of protein. That would be about 40 grams of muscle roughly, or 2 kilograms of muscle in 50 days. If you extrapolate this out over a year, we're talking about 25 pounds of muscle per year.
That'd be a lot of muscle.
Just from eating 225 grams of protein a day. They're in the metabolic. When they're working out, they're doing nothing. So the nitrogen balance suggests protein accretion that obviously does not pan out in the real world. It's not ecologically valid way to look at what's happening to body composition.
Yeah.
So when people talk about, a lot of times I get the sense, I'm not picking on anyone particular, but people talk about, we want to encourage nitrogen retention. It's like, I get it. I know what you mean. But nitrogen retention as a measurement in of itself is shit. It doesn't really help a lot. It's like, look at all the nitrogen I retained. And we measured it, everything. We measured all the skin that was sloughed off in my clothes, and I collected the hair in my comb and off the floor of my house, and I collected my feces and my urine and everything else. And I had all this nitrogen retained. It's like, well, you still look the same to me. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and isn't that also relate to why we had said that, like, you wanted to eat protein every 2 hours? Isn't there a relationship to that idea of, making sure that you get that protein in on a very regular basis to keep that? Because that's what I'd always heard, every 2 hours you've got to eat protein because your nitrogen balance will go down otherwise.
Yeah, that's just to maintain a constant protein synthesis. People would just use the nitrogen balance term because it's a sciencey sounding thing.
Yeah.
You could have just said you want to maintain protein synthesis.
Which at the end of the day we do, and I do think there is value to spreading your food out. So.
Oh yes, yeah, protein spacing your protein throughout the day. Yeah, that makes sense without a doubt. The science is pretty solid on that. But when people in that context, when they throw in nitrogen balance, in those studies they're not measuring nitrogen balance, right?
Yeah,
that's not typically. It's nitrogen balance. It might be measured every once in a while, but it's basically more of kind of a theoretical concept that gets used to indicate positive protein balance. Essentially, the nitrogen is just something you can measure, because once the protein enters the body, some of it gets incorporated into body proteins or into hormones or proteinaceous structures, enzymes, what have you. Some of it gets oxidized, right? So some gets retained, and the idea would be, if we're looking at body composition, the amount of enzymes you have, some amount of protein you have as hormones, ideally some amount of protein you have in your organs doesn't change, right? All your organs, you don't have splenomegaly, you don't have enlarged liver, what have you. So the protein that's retained from the bodybuilder's perspective is retained in the muscle cells, and all the other proteinaceous components of the body's protein stays the same. And then we could see from the nitrogen balance, but no one's actually measuring nitrogen balance anymore. Like, it's a huge pain in the ass to measure that. Like,
it sounds like
you gotta collect all your urine, you gotta collect all your poop.
Yeah,
you gotta know exactly how many grams of protein are coming in. We can't get people to do dietary recalls, much less like, okay, bring, here's 45 gallons of for your pee. When you pee at night, you got to pee in the jug. Like, if you're a woman and it's just like saran wrap to capture your poop. Yeah, that's why this study with Adoyo and Morgan, I think was the second name, the last one I showed there, 105 days in a metabolic ward. It's just 6 subjects, but they
Wow.
spent 50 days on that 225 grams of protein per day diet.
Wow.
And they were measuring everything. Like these guys, it's not like these guys were sneaking out, to poop when no one was watching, whatever. They were captive subjects for that.
Yeah.
I don't know what they got paid. Maybe it's somewhere in the study, but
So I feel like if
yeah.
we were to redo the Dbol study today for bodybuilders, number one, I want them to have a TRT dose of test throughout, because
Okay.
I could see that being a problem, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that we have the first section that you get the Dbol, the second section you get the placebo. Well, if you end up in that situation, then yeah, I could see, like you said, there were a few people that dropped off. What was going on? Were they going hypogonadal after having had the Dbol for a number of weeks? I want that test to be nice and consistent. So I suppose we need to have TRT patients only. We have to have that logged. That's
Right.
I'm just putting this together in my head. How do we do this today for bodybuilders to give us the research that we would want, to see the actual results? That would be my first step. Would be we have to all select TRT guys.
That's a keen insight, and that's part of the problem with a lot of the early, just generalizing now, the early steroid research is doses weren't necessarily high. Like this, like 10 milligrams of Dbol a day is you're getting 70 milligrams of androgen per week. You're not even at a standard TRT. So your total androgen, so to speak, the second study you sent me. There was a study of the person who was hypogonadal, and they looked at LH and FSH. I didn't read through all of that, but that was an interesting study because it was showing what you're talking about, is suppression of endogenous testosterone production. So if you presume that you've got a feedback regulatory loop here, right?
Yeah.
And normally you're producing, let's say you produce a good amount of 15 milligrams of testosterone a day, right? And then you take in 10 milligrams of Dianabol, and the system just is regulating around total androgen in the blood, and you distribute that Dianabol out. Like there was the idea, I think Duchesne said, it's like if you just take your D-ball in the morning, right, you will limit the amount of endogenous feedback, your feedback suppression you'll get
By the time you go to sleep at
yeah,
night, so
that
that you
sort
can
of
still
thing.
produce natural test. Yeah.
Exactly. But you end up basically losing your endogenous testosterone, and you really haven't gotten ahead, at least in
Yeah.
terms of total androgens.
Yeah.
So I think the thought, or at least maybe it wasn't always consciously expressed this way, is that steroids would be more potent. So
Ah.
if like, let's say, I think you'd get something different if you gave, let's say 10 milligrams of oral primo per day versus 10 milligrams of tren acetate injected per day.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
would see different effects there, right? And that's that
Yeah.
other talk I've given. So
Yeah.
there's different efficacy potentially among the steroids in terms of
Ah.
if you do basically through the steroid eliminate the endogenous testosterone,
Yeah.
if you still have the same rough blood levels on average over 24 hours of androgen, be it some mixture of endogenous testosterone and whatever the exogenous steroid is, if that exogenous steroid is more potent, then you could actually get ahead in the game, so to speak. Only if that's
suppose
the case, yeah.
also we would want to lock their diets in. Hey, let's get consistent.
yeah.
Everybody's on some type of diet, grams of protein per kilogram of body weight or something along those lines. Try to get that consistent. And then we'd want to probably do, like, you would want to control their training, wouldn't you? Like, let's get these guys in the lab and actually track what they're doing. Okay, this is what your bench press was. You did 3 sets of 10. And that way we can keep tracking that 3 sets of 10. Maybe not all the exercises, but a couple of key exercises that we pick and track all along the way. And you're not allowed to change your training routine, throughout this
Willy-nilly.
16-week course or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, let's lock these guys in, to be able to get some, because it sounds like there's so many questions, but I guess that part of it was like what you were kind of saying too, like they didn't really know at the time. They didn't know what we do today. I suppose that's got to be a big part of it.
Let me see. I'm going to share my screen again here. Here we go. And I see if I can find this.
Like, I'm surprised too with our conversation with Chris. Like, none of a lot of the research that he had looked at and that analysis he had done with growing muscle in a deficit or recomping, like a lot of that a lot of those studies had like no look at actual nutrition whatsoever. You know, I think we assume that stuff because in fitness, in like the fitness community, if we see a research study related to fitness, we assume that a lot of those things are going to be locked in. But you know, we're talking about a lot of normal everyday people. Yeah.
Somewhere in here, I can't find it right now, but they basically, and this is important with your subject selection, is they say, you know, it's okay that we did this because these guys are going to be using steroids anyway, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Trying to think where it was really, I totally got what they're getting at. Let's see.
And they were legal at the time, so
Yeah.
you know, they weren't a scheduled drug like they are today. It just couldn't happen today, could it? Because of like the social climate around steroids.
Let me see if I can just find a keyword. No.
All right. I mean, I suppose you could do it with some, you know, the things that are prescribed, testosterone, nandrolone, things like that.
Yeah, we have Boson studies. We've got studies with super physiological. Let me just stop my screen sharing here.
All right.
Androgens.
Yeah.
You know, those are in that are all anabolic steroids equivalent talk.
I want to lock it in though. I want to do some 2026 studies, Scott.
Yeah.
Where we get everybody dialed in. You're doing the same training, similar nutrition, all that.
Yeah, I mean a lot of thoughts to that. So one, with the nutrition too, as we talked about when we were talking with Chris last time, is you have some individuals just because of their genetic predisposition, you put them on. Let's say you figure out this is what their caloric balance would be, and we can add 500 calories. So they have energy to grow with. But sometimes, like even if you don't do that, some individuals will just recomp because when you start training them, they start putting on muscle. The energy required for that process. It's going to happen because they're just genetically suited for that. And then their bodies take energy from their body fat in order to serve that purpose. And then they get leaner and they recomp, but they gain muscle and lose fat at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So in the real world, to some degree, it's like, okay, well, scientists would want to say, if we keep all these things the same, we're just going to figure out what their caloric needs are, and we're going to just lock them into that. We'll still have some people who would recomp, and you might have some people who would be limited because you're not letting them eat more. And then you would have some people who would just be getting fat because they're not good responders, right? So that's the way you could get past that is have them check in, just like you do with progressive overload, and say, okay, we're not going to just progress you through 10 pounds every week, regardless of how many reps you get, until you're just doing singles because the weight's so heavy. We're going to progress based on your performance in the gym, only if you get X number of reps. So you would have to get a dietitian, registered dietitian, and get body comp measurements and say, okay, we're going to progressively increase your calories based on the changes in body composition that you experience to ensure that we're not limiting muscle growth.
So that constant would be the fact that they all were working with the dietitian.
Yes. So they all got a nutritional regimen based on their acute responses to the program as it moves along. So some guys might be growing like weeds. Like, okay, we don't care about body fat. We want to maximize the muscle mass that you could possibly gain. So you keep on gaining. So we will keep on increasing your calories by X amount based on how much fat-free mass you seem to be accumulating based on our measurements. Yeah. I have to do a DEXA. If you really want to know, you'd have to do like a 4-component where you measure total body water, because if it were Dbol, let's say, you start retaining water, and that would come out as fat-free mass, and it's not necessarily the fat-free mass that needs extra calories to encourage growth. That's just water retention.
Yeah.
Right. So that like gets really pretty complicated. And what else did you? you say there was something else, I think. Oh yeah, as far as the high doses go, the thing there is it's hard to justify a need for that. We as bodybuilders have a need. We want to fucking know that's our need, right?
Yeah.
I want to have this.
Where does it?
It's
Yeah.
cool, right?
Yeah, what's our optimal dose? That's what we want to know. So
Right.
what we in here? Let me make it more complicated. I want to do a cross-sectional study. By the way, we're going to get Chris Bearcat on the horn. He's going to call the school after this. We're going to get this all set up.
Okay.
We're going to just get this nailed down now, Scott, first before we call Chris.
Okay.
I want to do a cross-sectional study of all oral steroids and to see which one's the strongest, see what the optimal dosing is for each. 2027 is going to be the plan for this whole
Cross-sectional,
thing.
not longitudinal. Cross-sectional.
Wait, no, I just said cross-sectional because it sounded like a big word.
Oh,
I'll be honest.
you need. Yeah. That would just be like a
Longitudinal.
survey. You want to you want to give people
Longitudinal.
You want to give
I like
people
that
the
word
gear.
better.
Okay.
Longitudinal.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like the sounds of this. This is what we're gonna do. But then the other question would be: so if we did multiple compounds, you would have to get different sets of people for each one, because if we had one guy do the Dbol study and then he does the methyl trend study after that, he's already been exposed to Dbol previously. How long do we have to wait before we do the? You know, that could be a long process, Scott. So we're gonna need, and we're gonna want these groups to be big because, like you said, all of these, all the variability between individuals, we're going to need like at least a good 200 people per study.
Yeah.
You know, like it really, man, when we start looking at it that way, it really is impossible to get the actual, like, to know. If we wanted to really, like, we really want to know, man, that would be so much logistics to actually make all of that happen. It just, for me, it really brings out the fact that, like, science is freaking awesome, but it shows me its limitations too, you know?
Yeah. And the question is, what do you want to know? And I bring this up all the time, but I think it's very often it's important to go back. The question that science is often asking, we had the individual data here so we could look at this, but with groups where you're looking at means and standard deviations, you're doing statistics, the idea generally is, what would we expect if someone were given X, Y, or Z in terms of whatever our outcome measure was? And that's because we saw this, there was a statistical effect of this particular intervention, and it caused more muscle mass to accrue over the course of the training period or what have you, right? But that doesn't necessarily tell you what's going to happen to the individual per se. And that's the thing with gear, is there's so much variability as to how well people respond to it. And I think it probably varies depending on which compound you're talking about, right?
Sure.
That, I mean, like we saw this here, like we saw the one guy who was doing pretty good he didn't do very well on the steroid, and he seemed like he did better on the placebo.
Yeah.
Over the short period, mathematically at least, right? So what's going on there? Like, he's more amenable to a placebo effect than he is to a steroid effect. Potentially, we don't know.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is like, if you look, there's creatine's a great example, because there are non-responders to creatine. There's some people who just, whatever reason, they don't creatine load effectively. They don't get an ergogenic effect.
Which that's become a big topic lately. And I've seen that being promoted a lot lately, that, well, you got to remember that not everybody's a responder. Is it like 20, almost like 25%, close to that, isn't it?
I've not seen, it kind of depends on how you define that, but I've not seen that high of a percentage, but yeah, there's some percentage. And that could be simply because you eat a lot of meat and you've already been training for a while, and that will increase creatine content. There's numerous things. I haven't seen anyone dig in. It may be out there. I haven't looked. So I'm pretty agnostic as far as that goes. But what the factors would be, if there's some genetic factors in related to creatine transport or something of the like. But there's always going to be variability. Right, so you get a direction from the science, is that many people respond pretty well to creatine. That's awesome, great, cool, but not everyone will. So that's when you said, I want to know. It's like, well, what do you want to know the answer to, right? Whether this will work for most people. Is it a first good starting point? It's like, okay, you want big legs? Let's see if we can get you to squatting 315 ass to grass for a set of 10 over the next
Yeah.
3 years, right? And if your legs don't grow, well, okay. Most people would have pretty decent legs if they could do that. Not everybody, but most people. So that's the first, and then you figure out the next thing. So, hey, if it comes to gear, what's going to work for you? Well, testosterone is not a bad choice, right? Well, let's just use testosterone.
Yeah, good
right?
place to start.
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe something else might work better for you. So it's like that with men. It's like that with painkillers. It's like that. That's why we have different versions of drugs that basically have the same effect, not and different side effects, but for the same purposes. It's because some things work better for some people. So yeah, it all depends on the question you asked. But this was it was cool to see this study, like the prima donna-ish comment was awesome, right? The guys who were ghosting them and came in and got their gear. I mean, it's cool that they published that. Like this was a hard thing to do research on. Like they weren't able to just pull people and say we're going to start giving people steroids. These were guys that they had to that came to them initially. So I don't know these research. I know the Freed. I know that name. I've seen his stuff before, but I don't know what their situations were and how focused they were on trying to elucidate the ins and outs of steroid effectiveness back in the day. But that's what happens. And I tell you what, like having recruited a few subjects back in the day, it's just like with clients, with personal training clients. They can be really, really frustrating sometimes. People no-showing and ghosting, and I imagine it's probably much worse these days. But
herding cats, that's the term that comes to mind.
Exactly. So, yeah, so that's what I got from that study. It was pretty cool.
That was fun, man.
Yeah,
that was fun. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. I think that a lot of people who watch the channel will too. Like I said, man, it's your creativity, your imagination that you apply to it too. Then it gets me thinking, hey, here, I got one more thought, Scott. How about that guy who did better on the placebo than he did? So he had the gear and he did okay, made a little progress, and then he got the placebo. What if, because he did make progress on the gear. What if he just decided, I'm going to go get my own supply, and then really got on the gear, and then he was like, I can't lie to these guys anymore, and then he ghosted them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm getting huge.
There's a story behind each one of those subjects.
Yeah, which is fascinating it's more than just a little pinpoint on a plot,
Yeah, well, mean plus standard deviation. I always look at the standard deviation. The means are important, the differences in the means, what have you, but the standard deviations tell you a lot. So how much variability there was. So like let me pull that up again. Just why not? Let's see if we can find. So this is the performance that they reported. Steroid, placebo, low dose is the filled circles. So here's a low dose guy. I think he's one of the ones who's mentioned here. Low dose guy who made it like 4 weeks through, and then the data goes away. Right?
Yeah.
Percentage improvement in 4 weeks. He was up, it looks like just about 13%, a little bit less than 14%. So he was going from like benching 275 for 10 to benching 315 for 10 in 4 weeks. He's going in and he's benching every week on Mondays because that's when everyone benches, right? International Bench Press Day. And he's getting 10s with 270, sets of 10 with 275, and then he throws 5s on there and he gets 10, and the next week he gets 10 more and 10 more, and then, or maybe he throws a 10, and next thing you know, he's at 3 plates.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, this is great. Diana, thanks guys. Dianabol works for me. I'm going to go get my own, and I'm going to go on the high dose. Because he chose low dose initially. They got to choose which dose they would take. He did just as well as this guy on the high dose. That was interesting. They didn't have enough people to really discriminate whether high dose would work better than low dose, but he was just skyrocketing in his gains. This guy, when he got the steroid, he was not even 4%. So his gains in performance at this point is at 3%. We're 25% of what this guy got. So I wonder, what was happening with if these guys knew each other, right? Or they just can't, I mean, it was over a span of 2 years. So this was probably happening at different time points. But I wondered if some of them knew, like maybe this guy I just mentioned who stopped after 4 weeks, and made the good gains. If he like he's making all these gains and he runs into the other guy, it's like he's like, dude, what's going on? He's like, yeah, I went and I got in this study. He just tells the part that he might not be embarrassed about. So I went and got the study and they gave me Dianabol. It's just 10 milligrams. Right?
Yeah.
He didn't tell them that after that, like he bumped it up to 50 milligrams a day.
Right.
For the previous year. So
Yeah.
this guy goes in and says, hey, you got this study for like you can get 10 milligrams of Dianabol a day. He's like, yeah, sure. You want to do it? It's like, yeah, like, put me on the low dose. And then he goes, and he only increases 3%. So like he's gone from 10 reps with 275 to 12 reps over 4 weeks. It's like he got a rep like, every other week or something. Right?
Right.
His improvements aren't that great. He's like, I must not have been on the gear because they said I might get a placebo. And then he comes in, and then for a while he thinks he's on the placebo, and then he figures out he's not because he goes back and finds this guy. I'm totally making this story up, but it's just fun to sort of fantasize about it. And he's like, dude, are you starting to get back knee and stuff? It's like, no, I'm not getting any of that. It's like, what about like, are you getting hard-ons? Like, no. In fact, I haven't had morning wood for like a couple of weeks. It's like, dude, you're on the placebo. It's like, but I'm making good gains. It's like, I don't know, man. You're not getting the side effects I did. So he's like, screw this. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Where are you getting your stuff from? Oh, the guy in the back alley. Okay, can you rearrange a meeting so I can go talk to him?
Exactly.
So yeah, there's all sorts of, and then this other guy the one who he made really good gains, and then he just maintained them the entire time.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is great too.
It's
because
cool.
he did the gear first and then he maintained what he got. And next time he goes back on, boom, he'll do it again.
Yeah. And of course this was very uncontrolled. Like they weren't doing blood work to see, let's see, they did do some, this was not in this. Yeah. They just looked at SGPT. So, ALT, cholesterol. I mean, cholesterol was going up on the placebo as well as on the steroid.
Huh.
So it makes you wonder.
Their diet. Am I eating any different now because I think I'm on the gear?
Or maybe since everyone knew when they weren't, maybe this guy, this is what made me want to look here. Maybe this guy said, it's like, okay, now they're going to start giving me the placebo because I knew I was on the gear for the first 6 weeks or whatever.
Well, something else you've talked about.
And then he started taking the placebo, started taking his own gear.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's something else you've talked about before is that the idea of, hey, if I'm getting involved in this study and I'm excited about it, then I'm probably going to be paying more attention. Maybe they are, like, you can't help it. Are you going to start eating a little bit cleaner? Because if I go to the gym, if I'm not going to the gym, right, and then I start going to the gym, I'm going to start just automatically cleaning up my diet, eating a little bit better, trying to fuel my performance. And all those things kind of lead into then better progress.
Right. That's why the crossover design is nice. It's supposed to control for those time effects.
Okay.
Is the idea. So at the beginning, the law of diminishing returns might apply, or you're highly motivated, and then you start to say, this is kind of getting a little bit old or whatever. But the thing is, when people aren't blinded, and as they noted, I'm glad they mentioned that, like everyone knew, at least at the end, what they'd gotten.
Yeah.
When they figured that out, practically speaking, makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
If they're 2 weeks in, they're like, okay, well, I got zits all over the place, right? I can tell something's happening here.
It's hard not to know when you're on Dbol after a couple of weeks, even a low dose.
Yeah. So, what we did for my dissertation, you don't see this done a whole lot, but this was in the 90s when I was in grad school. We knew there was a placebo effect with creatine. I mean, some people would, you put on 5 pounds. Guys that are, paying attention, they're getting on the scale, all of a sudden they creatine load, or they've done it previously, and everyone knew, creatine puts on weight, puts on water weight. So we trained them with electrical stimulation. So all the training that we did was involuntary. Of course, they were volunteers for the study.
Right.
All of the muscle contractions were evoked with electrical stimulation. So the progressive overload was on an isokinetic dynamometer with electrical stimulation pads, the whole thing. and it was progressed based on what was happening on the dynamometer that we saw in terms of force production. So everything was progressed over the 8 weeks of training.
Yeah.
Now, what they did outside of that,
Yeah.
one guy, I know this because he told me this later, and he, as it turned out, after I broke the code, I think he was on creatine, but I know he had the greatest increase in quad cross sectional area, and he started going to which he wasn't doing before. And this guy was just like, he's just one of those happy-go-lucky guys who couldn't lie to save his life, and just does whatever, and he doesn't really think about what he's doing. Like, I wish I could be more like that, because he's just kind of stumbling his way through life and just enjoying every moment of it. He started going to Smoothie King every day and getting the Hulk. The name of the drink was the Hulk. It was like the 2,000 calorie Smoothie King drink with like 3 extra scoops of protein.
Anything.
No, not at all. Like, all of a sudden, he, added 50% to his caloric intake. So of course that's going to affect both legs, right? But he came into the study and he did that, right? And as it turned out, there was no difference between muscle growth creatine versus the placebo. Statistically speaking, at least. But people go in and they start doing those things. So there will be things outside of the training that can be impacted by a placebo effect, right?
Yeah, so that's why we lock them down. We got them on the dietitian. They're going to be at a Russian style Olympic training camp for the entire, But
even then, there's something about this placebo effect some of it's unconscious.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
It will just.
But they're not going to Smoothie King that way.
But they could be saying, hey, I'm not going out. I'm on the regimen. I'm all about the gains now, baby. I'm going to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night and get up at 6 to do my training or whatever.
We're gonna get Oscar Arden to do all their food for them.
Exactly. Right. They're gonna have to move into a really grungy hotel in Vegas for 6 weeks. Right, and just listen to motivational tapes the entire time.
Train with Oscar.
With Oscar, and do your cardio with a big hood on, and talk with really, really long sentences, and then you'll make the best gains. Right?
Yeah. So it'll make for great content for the channel too. I am so in the Dbol study.
I'm sure Chris will just be ready, rip roaring ready to try to bring all these subjects in for this study that we got.
Yeah, let him know we need 200.
We need just 200. Okay.
All right, let's wrap this
patiently
thing up,
for the results, in 2 years after he's finished all the work. Yeah.
Right. All right, guys, we appreciate you tuning in. Of course, once again, byobbcoach.com. Check out the link below for the hardcover, and of course, supplementsource.ca for Canadians, and truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK for all of your high-quality, third-party tested basic bodybuilding supplements like high-quality protein powder, creatine, intra-workout, and more. And, of course, thank you to everybody from Patreon. Guys, leave us questions for the next episode on Patreon for this show. Scott's over there, too, so he'll get to see those questions pop up as you get them. And, I think that's about it. Of course, for another episode of Muscle Minds, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Scott.
Cheers.